Welcome in the AL Recruiting Power 5 podcast. I'm your host, David Green, and we ask all of our guests 5 questions. And tonight we have a really special guest, former Alabama Crimson Tide star, Seattle Seahawks, Super Bowl winner, national championship winner, Jesse Williams is on the podcast tonight. Jesse, we are so glad to have you on tonight, man.
I appreciate you guys having me.
So we'll just get right into it. We're recruiting specialists. We're recruiting podcast. When you came out, I can remember I follow recruiting really closely, had been following it. When you came to the University of Alabama, prior to you, really there were Australian punters, but there'd never really been a position player, especially at such a high level in college football. So how did you get discovered, and kind of walk us through how you were found, how Coach Saban found you, and how you got to Alabama?
Yeah, it's a pretty roundabout story, but there wasn't really anyone before me at all. A lot of it was kickers, and that was sort of the only way in. And if you've ever seen me in person, I don't have the physique of a kicker, so that was sort of off the cards pretty early. But originally started playing basketball was my main sport, and then playing American football, Gridiron in Australia here, and then I was lucky enough I worked my way up the ranks playing for my state here. I played for Australia at a representative level. And then I was actually playing a game against New Zealand at the Australian Institute of Sport. And I was lucky enough to get sort of seen by a junior college. And at this time, I was probably 16, 17, 320 pounds. And I was playing a bit of D-end, middle linebacker, and tight end at 320. So stood out pretty good. And I think, I was down there for about a week camp. They were lucky enough to see me do a bunch of stuff, and I got to spend a bit of time with him. And, he was pretty upfront with me. He said, you definitely can make it in the U.S. We got no scholarships as a junior college right now, especially for Australian kids. But if you pay your first semester, we'll give you a spot essentially to try.
Mm-hmm.
So from then, I worked 3 jobs, fast food joints, some retail stuff, landscaping. I worked at my grandparents' cleaning company, saved up enough money with my family to pay for my first semester at junior college. And it was Arizona Western Community College in Yuma, Arizona, which is a very hot, lonely place in Arizona. But yeah, I was lucky enough. I was still playing football and basketball at the time, worked 3 jobs, saved up enough money, went to this junior college, and, I pretty much left Australia with, 1 bag, a couple of $100, and, I had the defensive coordinator's phone number written in my passport from when I met him in Australia. And then, I land probably 6 months later after that camp, and pretty much get to the airport in Yuma, Arizona, nobody there, and I'm call him on the phone and tell him, "Hey man, I'm here," and he was pretty shocked. But came and picked me up, and then the sort of rest was history. I was lucky enough to get into the school, and everything go pretty well. By no means was I expected to play or be good. I went in there pretty open and just like, I'm just going to outwork everyone. Let me just see. As long as my effort is there, I'm big, I'm strong, I'm very tough. I was like, we'll just see what happens. So I ended up doing that, and I started every game for the junior college, and then the next year, I was ranked number 1 player in the country on the NJCAA website, and I was I was a 5-star. I was sort of an All-American coming out of JUCO, and that's sort of when being number 1 player in the country, you sort of get on the radar pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Cam Newton the year before me, and in my year, it was amazing guys. Like I had Sheldon Richardson, I had Sharif Floyd, I had a bunch of guys that were coming out. They were coming out of high school, but coming out at the same time, going to big schools. So, for me, I didn't know anything about it. Coach Saban had a private jet coming out to watch me play in junior college, and I think they previously had a connection with the junior college through Jim McElwain.
Mm-hmm.
He was a great guy, and they would both come out and watch me pretty regularly. And I was lucky enough I played 2 years or 1.5 years to get my AA degree at junior college. And ended up finishing, top 1 or 2 player in the country both years. And when I was getting recruited, I knew nothing of it. I spoke to Joe Paterno on the phone. I've met all the Kiffins. I've had, Coach O come out and see me. I could barely understand him. I had Coach Saban come out, and I saw him in the cafeteria, and I walked right by him because I didn't know what he looked like, and which is a pretty unique situation for anyone that knows anything about college football, right? So it was good for me. I had an even playing field. I wasn't making biased decisions. I was lucky. My roommate, who was from South Carolina, had a big whiteboard up in my room, and it was like we were just writing down like coaches, conference, what sort of scheme, like how many seniors they got, like how many JUCO transfers, all this sort of stuff. And then it took about 12 months, and I had about 50 something offers pretty much to go anywhere. And Bama was always at the top for me. It just carried such a weight when I spoke of it to anybody. It just, people knew, like, and the Bama offer was quite early, to be honest. It might have been in the first 10 offers. So, as you can imagine, once Bama throws their name in the hat, everyone sort of just starts standing in line, like, surely if Bama's here, there's something real here. And I had like the whole SEC, ACC, all the West Coast schools and everything. And meeting with Coach Saban was a great experience. I really got along with Coach. Still to this day, every time I get back to the U.S., I go see Coach. And I went to school with his daughter, Kristen. Like, it was a really good relationship. And I think as soon as I took my first trip out to Tuscaloosa, it was like September 3rd, 2010. I played San Jose State opening game. And it was surreal for me, coming from Australia, playing in front of maybe 15 people, to run out in front of Brian Denny. And like, I had people with Australian flags. Everyone knew me straight away, which was so scary. It wasn't something I could comprehend really at the time. Like, even my junior college, it was like 100 or so people coming to watch, but yeah, then from there, once I was on their radar, I took the trip. I pretty much spoke with Coach Saban, met with Coach Smart. I already had the relationship with Coach McElwain. Met up with Cochran, did the whole tour, and the whole experience. And pretty much by the end of the trip, like, I did my exit interview with Coach, and I said, man, I don't need nothing else. Like, I believe in everything he was telling me, and some of those key things, obviously developing you as a man, just as much as a football player. Those were really important things for myself. And yeah, they were pretty excited, when number 1 player in the country. And I pretty much was like, yeah, this is it, man. Like, I'm a loyalty guy. I'm a buy-in guy. You guys put a lot of effort into me already. I can see a lot of care and love. And, obviously I want to play a role. And I wanted to, I had a little bit of a choice. So I could go to a small school, which at the time was a USC, a UCLA, a Hawaii, and just be the absolute man. Or do I go to a big school like Bama that, like, I would have to earn every second I get to touch the field? And that was by no means like number 1 player in the country. As soon as you get there, I'm standing there with 10 or 20 number 1 players in the country. You know what I mean? And it's you're back to square one. No one expected me to play. This is with like a year and a half of experience playing football in the US. And I rock up in Tuscaloosa, getting ready to work out. And I'm like, I'm playing with the best players in the country at every position. But yeah, it was, honestly, when I look back on it, it was a really easy decision. Felt really comfortable. I think what Bama does really well is put really good people in the spots for them to be successful, and all the way down to the recruiting guys, the academics, the trainers, like guys like Jeff Allen and the people around there. Like, honestly, I couldn't have football a part of my life without some of the relationships I have with those guys there. So it has always been a great choice. Alabama feels like home to me still. But yeah, it was a crazy up and down trip from Australia to JUCO to, essentially the number 1 school in the country. Even just from a cultural standpoint,
Well, I say this, you stood out. I mean, you were a very identifiable guy. I remember I was living around Birmingham. I saw you at the Birmingham Galleria. You were like, but walking by the arcade or something. I think your family was there, but you had the mohawk. I mean, you had the look, and it was like, well, that's definitely Jesse Williams. And I didn't want to bother you at the time because you were with your family and hanging out. But I mean, I think, when you're the number one guy and you have a look, everybody in Tuscaloosa, I mean, those people, even the youngest fan follows recruiting there. They know what's going on with their team.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of magnified the experience for me because I did have that look. Um, I'm not sure how it would have been if I just sort of fit in, and I sort of was getting stopped everywhere. Even once I was at the school and like enrolled in classes, like people were just like pretty much like you said, like I had the mohawk tattoos, like I did not dress like I was from the South, and people made it pretty evident early on that like I'm going to get spotted sort of everywhere,
Yeah.
which is cool. Like it's it's a different facet of their support and love for the team, and it's it's unconditional. It seems like never ending, especially in Tuscaloosa. But I was lucky enough to get a little bit of attention from it, and it took a while to get used to. That's for sure.
Yeah, and so when you go there and you go through this recruiting process, I mean, you kind of really don't bring a lot of knowledge of college football. You don't bring the background knowledge. Like you said, you were walking past coaches and talking to Joe Paterno. But, once you talk to those coaches and you say, hey, this is where I'm going, kind of what were your expectations at Alabama? What was your experience like while you were there?
Man, honestly, it was the best. I think not having any of that bias, like team, cultural or environmental bias, I think I sort of was taking everyone on like face value, and how they would treat me, and what they were good at, and how they would communicate with me. Those are big things. And I pretty much went in there, and most of my I enrolled early in the spring, so a lot of my contact was with straight away was with athletic trainers, strength and conditioning stuff, and like that's how I developed a good relationship with Jeff Allen and Ginger and Jeremy, all the guys that are still there, and all the way to Scott Cochran, and my mentor and one of the closest guys I was with, Terry Jones Sr. Um, they were you would the closest thing I would say is the epitome of like what Alabama is. It's just extremely professional. It's at the highest standard and the quality, and that never deviates. That's all the way down to how we treat each other. And I'm there, and they're trying to, wear me down and figure out where my edges are, I would say. And it just felt so comfortable to me. Like, Coach Terry and Scott Cochran became extremely close to me. Obviously, I was a big weight room guy. I loved the weight room, and what that meant to me. And I I think that went all the way through to the coaches and the way Coach Saban approached communicating with me. We used to talk a lot. One of his favorite movies at the time was the movie Australia. So he used to bring that up in the warm-ups about once a week. So we developed a back and forth thing. And when my family came over, everyone was so hospitable, and we went out to coach's house and did all that sort of stuff. So there was so much buy-in from them. And I talk on other podcasts about what is the sacrifices around playing at a school like Alabama. And for me, it was too easy. Like it cost absolutely everything, like heart, soul, blood, sweat, tears, relationships, family, all that sort of stuff, all in one. And the way they treat you, the way that the town is, the way the school is, it made it too easy for me to give all that every time I was there. And those relationships are still ones I keep to this day. When I go back to Tuscaloosa, I'm blessed to have thousands of friends around the country, especially in the industry of sports and football majority.
Mhm.
But I loved it. I think the intent they put into the standard and the quality at the University of Alabama, all the way to the academics. And I was waving to the janitors and people. I started knowing everyone that I was walking around because they would stop me on my, me running to my 8 a.m. after workouts and stuff like that. And I think that holistic, I think just culture of the South and people being quite nice and supportive to, the coaching staff, the school. Obviously, once you're part of the program, you're there. it sort of blew me away to start off with, and it wasn't something I wanted to get used to. I was very appreciative of the support being so far away. So far away from where I'm actually from, and being there by myself. The little things like that really played a big role.
Yeah, and you obviously maximized your time there. Yeah, then you were drafted by the Seattle Seahawks, and I know there were injuries there, but you became the first Australian to win a Super Bowl, to be a part of a Super Bowl team. And so, what did that mean to you? Like that you brought that with you? I mean, especially being the first position guy that did it, and now you get drafted, and you're on a Super Bowl winning team.
Yeah, it was surreal, to be honest. Like, I think I think I lost 4 games in 5 years of playing football before I got drafted into the NFL. So the winning part was something that was pretty standard, And then I think being going through that process at junior college to Alabama is it set me up really, really well. Junior college made me really grateful to get to Alabama, and Alabama really got me prepared mentally to handle what was, the NFL, and winning 2 national championships with Bama as well isn't too shabby of a pathway to the NFL for a lot of guys.
Right, right.
Um, and the Super Bowl stuff was great as well. I think Seattle and Alabama are so similar um, on the inside in how they care and work with their guys. And like you said, they dealt with a bunch of injuries and was lucky enough to play on and off and be around such great guys and great coaches. Obviously, Super Bowl team, and then we lost the next year. And I think for me, it was just a great learning experience being around the top of the top, even more so than Alabama. It felt like being able to learn and be around those guys, quality coaches, men and women that are associated with programs. That stuff, those relationships still are super strong. And I think that's some of the stuff that I'll keep for the rest of my life in regards to, what football was for me. But I loved it. It was so similar to Alabama, and the standard and how everything was. It made life real easy for me. Like JUCO, the hard work made the hard work at Bama a little bit easier. Bama, I think, with the way Coach Saban is and the program they run and the framework that is sort of holding the place together, it just walks you straight into the NFL, just ready to almost dominate. Like everything outside the injuries, like the playing football stuff was easy. The training, the discipline, going to meetings, all that stuff, never getting in trouble, like being good at the play. But that stuff was too easy because Bam was that was the standard already. I didn't know nothing else. I had no bad habits from, previous teams or all this other stuff that a lot of guys in the NFL go through. So I was lucky enough in that respect to try and tie that process together, at least so it's a little bit less seamless than, or less frictionless, I would say, than a lot of other guys.
Well, I'm gonna throw another question out here. I've got an extra one. I'm going off the script. So you said something that I really thought about. Pete Carroll was a guy that was looked at when he was in college football as a player's coach, fun-loving coach. He did all the fun stuff at USC, and then he obviously takes the Seattle job. But and Nick Saban there's some perception that he's not really a player's coach and that Pete Carroll is. But I think when you talk to guys on the inside, Saban is. So what are some of their similarities and what are some of their differences between Saban and Carroll, two guys that will go down? I mean, Coach Saban, the greatest college football coach in history, and Pete Carroll's right up there in the football profession.
Yeah, I think yeah, definitely. I think on the outside they look like polar opposites. I don't think they're the same. There's probably definitely some space in between it, but they are very similar in their approach and their outcomes. For me, there's a lot of funny interactions I had when I first got to the NFL because I was not prepared for what Pete Carroll was like. Like even going to team meetings and they would have a basketball hoop up there. They got music playing, like everyone is talking loud, like everyone's like, moving around. And it was just me sitting stationary in my chair, not moving one bit. I would say for the first 2 weeks of being in Seattle, in the meetings, team or positional, I thought they were trying to trick me. I was like, I'm not falling for this. Like, I'm like, this can't be how it is. Like, you go to a Bama meeting and like, if you cough too loud, like people are turning around and like, what is this guy's deal? And it's especially if coach is in there. Like I tell people he changes that atmosphere in the room. Especially those team meetings. He comes in there and it's just, damn, it's quiet. But I think they both have those really good tangible skills, being able to create relativity to guys. I wouldn't say they're both player guys. I think they're just really good at like figuring out the relativity of the issues that guys might be going through, and being able to find solutions. And they're both very different in their approach. Coach Carroll is very fun. It's heavily about competition and enjoying that competition as you go. And there's no point doing it without emotion and feeling everything. Where if I look at Coach Saban's, who is extremely effective in how they get things done, but it's discipline, it's hard work, it's attention to detail, it is one play at a time, it is all those things. And it's like we don't deviate. Like we're not like even when I was at Bama, like I just got in the habit of like not celebrating anything because I was like, it was just like so normal. Like high performance was just so normal. I didn't know losses. I didn't know like super highs because we just was so neutral all the time. But there's definitely a lot of tangible stuff in how their competitive nature comes out, especially with coaching. It gets serious. I like comparing them in the fourth quarter in tough games, in those situations where you start seeing what it is. And both of those coaches were testament to themselves. Like they don't shapeshift to fit the game. They don't shapeshift to fit the situation. They are them no matter what. Like I've been there, losing the SEC championship to LSU in 2011 and 12 with Coach Saban. Like it is the same post game. I know exactly how it's coming out. It's not any more sad or it's not any more negative. It's the same. It's just we're attacking the problems that we need to fix. And we got 24 hours and we're back to the next one. Mm-hmm. And then same with Coach Carroll. We infamous play, lose the Super Bowl to Brady, thrown on the 5-yard line or whatever on the goal line, and it's the same. He has nothing after. He's just the same. It's the same energy, same all that. Way harder situation, but man, it's those guys just stick to their guns, and I think their quality is not only tenured over a long period of time, but I think those guys do it in each and every moment. And I think if you're around them for long enough, you see that. When I was lucky enough to retire and I went back to coach in strength and conditioning at Bama for about 2 years, I got to see coach in a completely different light. And it was so different, but almost exactly the same. It was just like I was just seeing it from a different angle. I was seeing the same movie. I was just sitting in a different seat. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the quality is. It's like layers of paint. It's compounding, and obviously started from their playing careers all the way to now. And it's just so ingrained that like greatness just has to happen from that. They got no other choice.
That's an incredible perspective. I thought, man, I got to ask him that question because you've just played for two legendary coaches. So I appreciate you answering that. And so,
worries.
You had another opponent that came up in your life and was off the field. And I don't know if many people, a lot of times Bama fans, we watch guys in the NFL, but we just don't continue to follow the story. But you dealt with cancer off the field. Really, it's one of those things that kind of cut your career short. But, when I see you, and I imagine, I was telling you before the interview and the podcast that I have a picture of you on a newspaper clipping up in my office. And you've got the paint and you are going all out. And that's kind of the images that come up. And I just have to think that when you dealt with something like cancer and all the background you had in football and who you are, and that's kind of how you attack life, is that how you dealt with something like that and kind of getting news like that in your own life?
Yeah, I think, it's funny, almost exactly how I just described those two good coaches was sort of the same way that I sort of attack my stuff. And I try not to deviate too far from how I am and the processes. And it's one thing I learned from Coach Saban. If it ain't working in the second quarter, I need to go back to, what I was doing in the first quarter. And that's sort of how it was. Like it came out of left field, definitely. And I think my approach to football that was fine-tuned at Alabama as I was working through the stuff in Seattle, sort of led me straight into it. I had, I was, to be honest, I was completely fine. When I found out, I was probably the only one not crying. I think for myself, I did a lot of tough years alone from the age of 17, pretty much in a different country, different world. Adversity and building resilience becomes almost the norm. And I think if it was my family, my mother, my son, or something like that, I would be broken.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time in my career, I was, the simplest way to put it, I was just such a bad man. I was such good shape. I was so hard headed and determined and like so gritty that I couldn't be shook by anything. And that's sort of how I took it. I told Seattle, I'm glad it's me because I couldn't handle it if there's nobody else because I wouldn't be able to control it. But it's one thing I could control is waking up and doing this work and attacking it like I attacked everything else. And it's funny, I actually wore my game day outfit. I told my parents the night before I went into surgery to remove my kidney, like 3 days after the announcement. Um, I wore my headphones. My brother's got photos of me walking in the hospital like I was walking into the stadium. And I told my parents, I said, don't talk to me, don't like cry, or let me just do what I got to do. And that's sort of was my mindset to it. Like I remember this day in the hospital, sitting there in my gown, I'm getting ready to get prepped. I told my dad to take a photo of me, and I looked, I looked super jacked wearing this thing, and I was staring straight at him. And I posted it on my Instagram before I went to surgery. Knowing that could be my last post ever, it could be anything. I literally posted no fear in my heart, and I posted that photo. I still have it, and that was exactly the attitude I went into it. That was the same way I went in fourth down, two hands in the ground at the SEC championship. The same way I attacked, having cancer, and I think being in such good shape physically, but also mentally, really helped on the way out as well. Like, to my demise, I came back 7 weeks, 5 days later, and ended up still playing in the preseason. One kidney down, splitting all my stitches, bleeding out of 12 holes half the time. But it was the leaning heavily into what I was lucky enough to develop and learn in myself throughout my football career, to the moment when I was, everything was on the line, and football, when people start throwing around the cancer word, football sort of starts losing its value real quick in regards to what that means long term and what that means in regards to my life. But yeah, it was definitely disappointing. Look, I was just getting over, I feel like, the wear and tear of playing at Alabama when I got to the NFL. And I say that with a grain of salt. I wouldn't change a thing. I tell people all the time, I said if I went back, I would do nothing but probably try and hit harder in certain situations. And I was happy to lie on the table, lie in the training rooms any amount of time because I knew my name is carved in the marble in Bryant-Denny Stadium for those exact reasons. And yeah, I just thought I got over the wear and tear, and I was just getting really good. I was just started all 4 preseason games. I was just getting on a run, and then obviously, yeah, the life and the universe had something different for me. I really, as a really young man at 24, I really, really tried to do a good job of trying to interpret that and learn from whatever something is giving me right now. I had the opportunity to come back and play once I got out, went back to Bama. I was there for about 8 months coaching, getting myself sort of physically and mentally back to the real world and working. I loved it. But I got a call from Dan Quinn when he moved to the Falcons to come out and work out for him. And yeah, I worked out and they loved me. I was still pretty hesitant. And then there was a few insurance and contract issues I didn't really want to sacrifice on. So I ended up just staying and coaching at Bama at that time of my life. My son was quite young, and it was football. I never really wanted to be defined by football. My actions and wasn't what I did, it was how I did it was what is important to me. And I just felt like, man, that was my time. I got to use football for every ounce of what it was for me to develop myself as a man and put myself in a good direction for the rest of my life. And it was a blessing. I wouldn't change anything for the world, but sometimes it's not always green lights all the time. It's not always orange. Sometimes I get a few red lights here and there, and that was just one of them. And I was lucky enough to come out somewhat unscathed, a little bit tougher, a few more scars, one organ down, and on to what's next.
And speaking of what's next, I mean, we kind of connected back in January because I feel like what I'm doing is I want to help people, and I want to help people, and especially young men, achieve their dreams. And I saw really re-followed you because I probably followed you when you were playing football, and then that kind of comes to the end. So I have to unfollow a lot of guys at times. But then I saw that you were helping guys, and I'm interested myself in the international brand of American football. And I've been working with guys from France, and people are reaching out to me from Europe. And then I saw you were in Australia working with young men. And so I was like, hey, I got to connect with this guy because this is something that I want to expound upon myself. And so, tell us what you're doing now, working with young men in Australia. Talk about your foundation, and then Gridiron Australia.
Yeah, so obviously, being from Australia, when I came home after coaching at Bama, was really around changing my, I guess, outlook from a receiving role and being in all those amazing places and confirmation money, whatever, to more of a serving role for myself. I just felt that a lot of the skills that I had were really tangible and could really affect a lot of the guys that were essentially me that are back here now, especially with a lot of the problems that are happening in Australia with a lot of the youth issues. And for me, coming back was really like, I see rugby, I see a lot of sports here, and they sort of go nowhere, right? There's not a crazy amount of success pre, during, and post for a lot of those guys. It's a very tough sport. Longevity is a word that's not thrown around too regularly in that conversation. And I think for me, football was like this catalyst in my life for immense growth and change, and not only as a man, but in so many areas of my life, to how I am now, being able to have networks around the world and all this sort of stuff, and have a college education, and all you got to do is play football or a sport. So it originally, with my background in strength and conditioning and coming back, everyone sort of knew me. So it was like everyone straight away was like, "Hey, can you help me do this? Can you help me do this? Can you help me do this?" And I'm like, it's very tough, very tough. I'm trying to I want to create opportunities for a lot of young men, but in the same breath, I got to explain the severity of what this cost of this opportunity looks like over a long period of time, physically, mentally. But that's sort of how my involvement with football back in Australia, and reconnecting with the national body, which is Gridiron Australia. So they run all the tackle football, which happens nationally, as well as the flag football, which is growing worldwide, and especially in Australia at an exponential rate. And I was super interested in getting around and not only having the opportunity and being able to connect guys through my network, but what we're doing now in our national combines is getting guys from other sports and highlighting attributes that probably are not being used as much in other sports, or shunned in a lot of sports. For example, you got Jordan Mailata, who's with Philly. He was playing rugby and it was terrible. Like, he's huge and he could run, do all those things, but he could play for about 5 or 10 minutes, which is, there's no point in having you out there. But as you see, you plug him into a American football situation, this whole conversation goes from average to Pro Bowl level really quick, just intangible skills. So really the push behind it with Gridiron Australia was like, let's try and find and highlight some of these kids, because the interest is there so much. I feel like the Americanization of fashion, music, all that sort of stuff, the accessibility on people's phones to be able to watch NFL Game Pass, to be able to watch NBA, to be able to do that sort of stuff is getting so big in Australia. It's only a matter of time before the sports start catching on and people are like, oh, I want to play this. I want to try this. Mm-hmm. And then we've started running these camps. We ran them last year, probably when you saw last. And this next wave starts in 2 weeks. We go 2 weeks traveling around the country. We got Russell Hewitt from the NFL Academy in London coming over. He's going to assess guys, as well as a few high school coaches from Utah coming out that are really interested in helping. And honestly, it is huge for us at the moment, developing the sport around the country. But from the U.S. perspective, we're still small. But everyone is interested, right? Everyone wants the next Jordan Mailata. Everyone wants the next Jesse Williams, freak kid that can merge over from a sport. And we're hoping to find that. So the foundation, my family's foundation, First Step Foundation, sort of comes in the background really as a bit of a cushion to try and make some of the transitions a bit easier for some of these athletes. Football being a pay-to-play sport out here still, very low funding, if any at all. So there's a lot of monetary barriers, I would say, for kids coming out of low socioeconomic status situations. And that seems to be a lot of the kids we get. A lot of the indigenous or Pacific Islander kids are the biggest kids we got, but they usually come from some of the more tougher backgrounds. So, yeah, it's been an amazing little journey the past year or so, working with Gridiron Australia, building them up to be a strong national body and have some great coaches and great people on the board, and really making some moves to now with the foundation, working with them and a bunch of other guys around. And, we're talking to Miami, a few guys in the SEC, a few guys on the West Coast, like big schools that are super interested. We're going to compile a list of guys. And sort of some of the stuff I spoke to you about is really just trying to get them on the radar. It's not about that we are not out here crafting elite level football players, but we have some freaks out here that we can craft into pretty good athletes to get ready for some of the situations where coaches can sort of take it from there. And it's picking up a lot of weight at the moment. The NFL's got a very keen eye on the Pacific Ocean, I would say, in the last few years, just with the amount of guys going over, not just the punters, even though the punters is an amazing program through ProKick. So yeah, we're doing a lot with that. And, my biggest thing is it's not a huge monetary thing for me at all. I don't really have a business, anything around it. It's more just want to play a role and add value to these guys because, like I said, all the way at the start, there was no one really before me to try and walk behind. There was no information. It was me and my dad trying to figure it out. And we didn't even know what the SATs were. We didn't know what the NCAA stood for. You know what I mean? So like, you can only imagine the range between what that looks like to now, where it's like, we're going to have some academies set up where, man, we might be able to just plug and play guys straight into some schools where we can essentially change the trajectory of their whole lives. Starting with education, like the NFL is way down the line and making money. Obviously, with the NIL stuff, they can, but we push heavily in being able to get a degree and get some tangible things people cannot take from you. I can lose my rings, I can do all that sort of stuff, but I always have my degree and that education. So that's where the push is at the moment. Like I said, we're getting a lot of traction, sort of definitely in the US, definitely in Australia, and it's a hard push for us because we're competing with a lot of cultural sports in rugby and Aussie rules. But the interest is growing, and it's slowly leaning in our direction. And right now, it's just me. Some of the Aussies that are playing the NFL, we got Adam Gotsis, Jordan, some positional guys that are still over there that we're communicate with them quite regularly. We got a lot of the punters. We work closely with ProKick and trying to get a lot of those guys still funneling through. But man, it's a hard slog at the moment. But the passion is there, the fire is there from all of us here, and we're looking to put some guys over there. And these guys don't know the difference between Alabama and going to a small Division II. So our goal is really just get some guys over there into not the biggest school, not the smallest school, but just good situations that suit how they are as people, their education, their journey. And it's looking really good at the moment. We've already sent a bunch of guys, and it's very early days, but man, we're pushing hard and we're getting some good traction, and we're really excited to see what we can do in the next, 5 to 10 years.
Well, I know we have a lot of coaches that listen to this podcast that follow me. And so I just want to encourage you, follow Jesse. His Twitter is right here on the screen. You can give him a follow. You can reach out. He'll respond, obviously, because he's on this podcast with me tonight. And so, and I just want to say this, man, anything we can do to help you, just want to say it publicly, I will do it. And anything I can do and what my organization and what we do, we would love to help you and get your name out there. And because that's ultimately what we want to do is help kids achieve their dreams and get to where they want to go. So, but I appreciate what you're doing already.
No doubt. I appreciate it. I'm doing the best I can to try and send some guys back to Bama. See when I get some freaks. Everyone's trying to hit me up, and I'm trying to be not biased and just get into some good schools. But Bama's always on my mind, obviously. But yeah, we'll see how we go. We appreciate everything. You know, we've already had a bunch of coaches reach out on Twitter and Instagram, and you know, we try and get as much content out as we can. As you can imagine, we're like a 2 or 3 man team doing a lot of this stuff around the nation. So I'm just lucky we got some of the support we do have, and we're going to try and get as much information and a list of our athletes, hopefully over the next month, to a lot of the coaches. So really excited to get some feedback from that, and man, and see what sort of stuff we can get going, and hopefully get some guys over there, and hopefully in the South, so I can get over there and make some trips and visit a lot of guys in the South. But you know, we're happy to get some guys just into positive opportunities.
Well, Jesse, man, we appreciate you. I know Bama Nation has always appreciated you and what you did playing at Alabama and being there. And so a lot of our listeners will definitely reach out. And I just want to say thank you from me for being on my podcast tonight. It really means a lot to me. So I really do appreciate it.
No worries, man. Thank you for having me.
Well, I appreciate everyone for listening. Hit the like, subscribe, follow Jesse. You want to keep following what he's up to in Brisbane and all of Australia. But thank you so much for everybody for listening tonight, and God bless.